So I listened to a podcast, and admittedly it's called the Keto Answers podcast, and it's by Dr. Anthony Gustin. And before I make this video, I thought to myself, obviously there's a bias there if it's a keto podcast, but he brings on some really, really good experts. And one of these experts did not have a keto bias. He was just into whole foods. And it was really interesting because he brought up a point that I thought I would share with you today. Now, I want you to think, if I were to ask you the question, what are the most nutrient-packed, nutrient-dense foods on the planet? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Now, if you're like most people, you're thinking, fruits, veggies, of course. Green leafies, these are the superfoods. What you're probably not thinking is what is very shocking. When it comes to absolute nutrient density, this particular gentleman was reviewing research and clinical research that was showing which foods yielded the highest amount of nutrients. So when I say nutrient density, imagine a food that is just packed with nutrients, right? Per square inch. And the very first thing that is on the top of his list, now ready for this, this might make you a little sick, but it's true. It is organ meats, okay? Liver, it was right there on top, heart, kidney. These organ foods are number one, which is interesting because we've been conditioned in our society to think that they're absolutely disgusting, right? We've been conditioned to believe that they're nasty, but you scale back into the 40s and 50s and you do a little research, these are actually very sought after. If you go even further back to indigenous cultures, and before we had this conditioning about how bad they were, Eskimos, Native Americans, they would all go for the organ meats because they instinctively knew that these were packed with nutrients. They're packed with minerals and things that you're not going to find in sufficient quantities that you will with a veggie, okay? Now, just below that was like free-range organic flesh meat. So this is more your typical, steak and fish and poultry. The density of this, it was higher when tested for multiple nutrients, was higher than it was for veggies. Okay? Now, here's the interesting thing. Third on the list, which was still above veggies, is herbs and spices. And these are things that we really don't get a lot of in our nutrition. These are kind of these X factors, and this is something I've started to incorporate into my nutrition as of late, whether it's I'm putting it into my green shake or putting it on a steak or what have you, on a salad for that matter. I'll put in like thyme or rosemary or dill. There's all sorts, those are just off the top of my head, there's all sorts of powerhouse basil that are just loaded with nutrients, but yet we get these cheap, store-bought little knockoff versions. When you get these herbs and spices, make sure they're clean, organic, and if you can do that, you're going to be getting a hell of a lot more nutrition than you would be from like a whole grain, which leads me to the next thing. The fourth thing is veggies. So green leafies, non-starchy vegetables. These are, like I mentioned, your green leafies. These are not your starchies. These are the ones that we commonly place at the top, when in reality they don't have the most nutrient density. We have to have a whole smorgasbord of them and juice them and everything to really extract them out. Not to say that they're not good, they're excellent. But as far as nutrient density, they rank a little bit lower. And from the research that I've seen, some of the podcasts that I've listened to, the books that I've read, I see this theme recurring over and over and over. Weston A. Price used to look at indigenous cultures, and they would always go to the meat base. Most cultures would find that nutrition really came from meat based. And this is not a slam to veganism or vegetarianism or anything like that. I'm looking at it from an objective point of view and saying, okay, which foods yield the most nutrition? And way down on the list, like 5 or 6 is like whole grains. And especially if you look at them today with the nutrient depletion of our soils, it is no wonder why they're so low. And they were never as power packed to begin with. Even in their most whole, natural, organic, unadulterated form, they're not as powerful as the organ meats, as the flesh meats, as the herbs and spices, as the veggies. Okay? And so if you look at this pyramid of nutrient density, it's an interesting thing, because if you look at some of the popular diets of our age, I mean, look at keto. I mean, not a lot of people, they're talking about being in ketosis, but they're not talking about nutrient density. And that's up to us to make sure that whatever diet we're on, whatever we're doing, we have to make sure that the quality of that diet is yielding vitamins, nutrients, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, secondary nutrients, you name it. It's got to be high on that list. And that's why I wanted to share this pyramid with you today, to give you a little bit more of a proper and somewhat unconventional perspective of what is a very nutrient-dense food. Okay, so keep this in mind as you plan your nutrition this week. Maybe you need a little bit more meat in your diet, right? And there's not a study out there that shows if it's from an organic, free-range source that it's going to give you prostate cancer or anything like that. If you look at the studies there, it's a bunch of BS, because most of those studies are epidemiological, which means they're surveys and they're asking people over time. There's no clinical studies, there's no randomized trial. None of that is actually happening when they come out and they say, well, red meat causes cancer, right? No, that is, you have to look at, where is the source coming from? When you do an epidemiological study, you have no idea where the source is coming from. But when those studies have been done, more controlled and clinical, when it's free-range organic, there is nothing to show that it increases cancer risk. So looking at this holistically and objectively, it's interesting. And it requires an open mind, because it gets rid of the isms. Like there's dogma, and I've seen dogma in veganism. I've seen dogma in people that are on keto. I've seen people that the newest thing is the carnivore diet. There's dogma surrounded with all of that. If you can get rid of that, get rid of the dogma, and just see it for what it is, well, then you can start to see, okay, what is actually working and what is not working. What yield, as far as like intuitive eating, what yields more nutrition clinically, what doesn't, right? Biases aside, dogma out of the way, it's very simple, okay? So I thought you would enjoy that today, my friends. Enjoy. Please comment here on the blog, or if you're on YouTube, please comment. Let me know your experience. If you want to challenge this, please let me know. Let's get a dialogue going on this. I'd love it. If you have any questions, please let me know. Again, please leave those comments. We are so excited to be talking about subjects that are a little bit more unconventional. I hope you're enjoying this, my friends. Remember to never excuse away that inner greatness, and always remember, life is good. Have a great day.